So if you've been watching my content for a while now, you would have saw one of my previous videos, maybe a few months back, where I spoke about the book Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. And that's one of my favorite books, to be fair. That book really shifted my sort of mindset in terms of what it means to become successful, right? And ultimately, in short, Outliers is a book that really details the ideas of what success means and how you are able to actually become successful. And it looked at sort of the intricacies of you kind of being in the right place at the right time, or kind of establishing yourself within the right region, or maybe the right location in your life, or you just were born in the right time when it came down to the sort of advances in technology, or all those sort of different things. But the point that I wanted to make is that as far as outliers go, it always comes down to being in the right place at the right time, doing a particular thing in a particular way that then attracts the right people for you to get the particular result that you were looking for. And for me, I thought that was quite interesting because I feel that now we are living in a moment with the rise of AI and all the sort of technology and the tools that are now available to us when it comes down to building a brand. But in this video, I wanted to talk more so about the idea of content outliers, right? And then what that means and how you can incorporate that within your brand strategy in order to develop more content that aligns with your ICP, and ultimately some content that allows you to experiment and test and trial in a way where you are then able to improve your content over time, right? And if you don't know who I am, my name is Tariq Peters. I'm a brand authority strategist, and I'm also an accredited PR practitioner. I've been in the industry for almost a decade now, and I help B2B founders and advisors build a level of brand authority, which is their personal brand multiplied by their business brand multiplied by their campaign brand. When all those three brands align, you get to a level of brand authority that makes you more visible and credible to your desired target audience, that will allow you to drive more leads into your business, which means more clients and ultimately more revenue for your business, because that's what we are doing it here for, right? So if you're interested in all things PR, marketing, branding, then please make sure that you subscribe, and also click in the description box if you are interested in checking out my Substack, as I post content on there on a weekly basis. So you can check that one out as well. So when I talk about content outliers, right, let me just explain what I mean. Content outliers is literally the content that you develop and the ones that sort of shoot up compared to the average. So let's say, for argument's sake, you're posting content and your sort of average is maybe 100 views per video, right? In that case, if you were to produce another video and that video shoots up to 500, then that is an outlier in itself, because that is something that stands out from the crowd. That's something that is something that has seen a sharp increase or a sharp rise in the views based on the content that you put out. And I feel some of us don't necessarily consider or bear in mind the importance of content outliers, because content outliers doesn't necessarily have to be just based off the video content you do. It may be based off the content that you write about on different platforms, say a Substack. It may be based on the idea of you producing more sort of written form post on other sort of platforms like LinkedIn, for example. It all comes down to how you are then able to develop said content, and also look at the data and the analytics to suggest the reasons as to why this has become a content outlier. And when you are then in a position to then establish that, and you're able to then look at the data that can then tell you a story of how you are then able to see why it worked, or why it was successful, or why it was successful in the sense that it was an outlier, that it got a sharp increase in views, then you are then able to tell a story as to why you are getting these views and what you can ultimately do to improve on your content. Because, for me with YouTube, I feel it's more based on your level of experimentation and how much you are willing to try to develop different forms of content, and ultimately to get to the point where you find something that connects with both yourself and your audience. It's something that you are more than happy to put out, and then something that the audience are more than happy to watch as a result as well. So it's like a sort of match made in heaven. Think of it like more yin yang. It's like something that connects both parties, because it ultimately is something that you enjoy doing and something that your audience enjoys watching and being consumers of when it comes down to the idea of content. So then, with that in mind, that's the first part of it, I would say, to have an understanding of what the content outlier is. But then when you think about the content outlier, you need to then think about what can you then do after the fact to then improve the videos over time. So, for example, even for a lot of my content, right? A lot of the content that I tend to put out, the outliers that stick out are the ones where I cover more sort of topical, relevant, relatable topics that's happened recently. So basically, newsjacking, where I just kind of do content and video based on something that's happened recently, where sort of the mass general population would be aware of or they have an understanding of. And when I do the videos, I tend to cover it from a branding angle in a way that still aligns with the channel. So even with that, depending on the way that I would do the video, I suppose it could vary with the amount of views. But what I have seen as something that has been a constant is whenever I tend to do a video that involves a sort of timely, topical news story, and I incorporate the element of branding or marketing or PR into the mix, those are the ones that tend to get more views compared to me talking about sort of more sort of evergreen content of me just talking about things that I feel that are always apparent and something that we always need to be hearing about or discussing or talking about, right? So with that, I would say no matter what platform you are using, have an understanding of what your content is doing as far as engagement goes, right? You need to look at it from the perspective that it's in your best interest to experiment with your content, try out different things, test out different hooks, include different sort of statements, make it relevant to yourself, of course, but then play around with it. Make sure that you are then able to have a pool of data that you can incorporate and utilize. And I suppose that's when we get to the next step of this sort of video, where you have to do the content or you need to get involved in order to have the data to then analyze to see what's working and what's not working. Plenty of times I'm speaking to prospects and I'm speaking to people asking about where's your content? Where is your content? What are you doing to position yourself as a key person of influence and the obvious choice? And then I then realized that with a lot of the conversations I'll be having, it's more a case where a lot of people are sort of nervous or they don't necessarily know how to produce content or they feel quite anxious, right? And, I'm going to drop a video as well talking about a few tips on how you can kind of remove that level of anxiety when it comes down to producing content, because, I've been recording and uploading sort of one video a day every day for over 100 days now. So I'm over 10% in on my journey of dropping one video a day for 1,000 days. So a lot of that has been things that I've had to learn and overcome in my own right. But I digress. So, with that, you then need to understand you need to be able to produce the content. You need to be able to produce the content and the data in order to get the data. And once you have the data, then you're able to then be able to read it and to be able to showcase what's working from what's not working, what content is getting sort of more engagement. But then more importantly, right, because we are talking about revenue generating brands here, you also need to bear in mind what content are you producing that is more likely to then align with the idea of getting more calls in your diary to get more leads into the business, right? Which I mentioned is more clientele, which is more revenue for the business. What metrics are you following on that basis to ensure that your content aligns with that? Because by all means, you can focus on the sort of metrics of the engagement, the impressions, the likes. All those things are relative to a degree, but then you also need to have a separate sort of metric list that you work by to then establish what content is actually driving in those opportunities where prospects are looking to book calls with you or looking to be more inbound off the back of watching your content and seeing your work and being more immersed in your ecosystem, as I mentioned all the time. So with that, that's something that you have to bear in mind. But then when it comes down to producing that content, analyze that data and see what the metrics are telling you. And then from there, you can then start to effectively categorize your content. You can categorize your content, and then you are then able to see what sort of content gravitates the most towards your audience based on the aspect of engagement and based on the aspect of sales. And then when you then have them separate like that, then you're able to then have an idea of the sort of buckets of content that you know that you can produce that will have more or less repeatable sort of aspects of what it will likely do. So some content you know that you'll produce will likely be generating engagement and likes, but no leads. Whereas you may have particular content that you know will get limited engagement and doesn't necessarily get any comments, but it does get people actively reaching out to you in the DMs, asking for more information and more details based on that. So that's when you need to focus on your content outliers from those two particular areas, based on the aspect of engagement and based on the aspect of sales. And when you then have an understanding of how you are then able to produce said content that aligns with both buckets, then you are then in the running sort of idea of how you are then able to develop content predictably, knowing that it's going to get predictable sort of outreach and responses based on what you've been able to do. But you can only get to that point when you start to produce the data to begin with. You cannot get to a point where you start to understand the level of predictability without data. It's impossible. You can't do it because you just don't have anything to work off of to understand why it works, to understand why it connects. And, you know, with that, you have to get to the point of just doing the thing, because if you don't do the thing and start doing it, it's going to be a lot more harder for you to get to that level of predictability where now everything starts to make sense for you as far as content goes. But you won't know until you get started. So if you are watching this and you can relate and you know that you haven't started to produce the content in order to get to a point where you have the data to work from, please start creating the content as soon as possible. And if you need support, or if you need help, or if you need a strategy call, or whatever the case that I can do to help you, check in the description box down below. I have a link and you can apply for a phases brand authority clarity call, and I'll be happy to have a chat with you, right? And then lastly, I would say is, now you have the understanding of the content outliers, what it actually is, how you are then able to effectively identify those outliers. Now you then need to consider the outliers from other people. You need to start looking at your competitors to see what content they're posting, to see what they're talking about. And you need to think of it from the aspect of sort of two things. You need to think of it from the aspect of your competitors, what they're posting, what they're doing, how they're effectively developing the content that they're developing. And you need to establish what outliers they are being able to get as a result of their content. There's so many different tools that you can incorporate for you to be able to scan and analyze the data of your competitors, but that's a video for another day. Comment below if you want to see that video. The other side of things is your customers slash clients. Based on their pain points, based on the things that you know that they have issues with, that they need resolving, how are you then able to look at the content that they produce, or look at the ways that they're able to do stuff? What are the outliers within the content that they are immersed in that you are then able to look at, and then you're able to redevelop in your own unique way for them to also see that you cover the very same pain points that they look at all the time and they resonate with, and they feel like they need to get this resolved as soon as possible as a matter of urgency. And then how are you able to slot yourself in as a key person of influence, but then also the obvious choice for them to realize that you can resolve their issue, right? And then that's when it comes down to being able to do that sort of idea of competitor analysis and looking at the outliers that your competitors are doing. But then also, one little gem that I would give you is that, sometimes we get so focused on our immediate competitors and what they are doing, right? That we don't necessarily take the time to look at the outliers within different industries and different niches, right? There's going to be some things that people are doing within various different industries and niches that may not necessarily be apparent within your world. And if you are then able to incorporate the content outliers from other industries and incorporate it within your content strategy, looking at those same particular pain points that your ICP is having, that will make you stand out in your own way, because that shows a level of uniqueness in your approach, knowing that you are able to attract and target your ICP with the pain points as mentioned, looking at the things that are urgent for them, the things that they are looking to have resolved, right? Looking at their level of ambition, their pain points, all those sort of things matter when it comes down to the idea of producing said content. But then sometimes we keep ourselves so siloed, or more often than not, sort of in the same box as everyone else, that we just don't really take the time to look into other industries and niches and looking at the different outliers that are present within those worlds, right? Once you then incorporate that and then bring that into your ecosystem and your world, then you will start to see your content shifting into different aspects of things. And through that, that's when you are then able to then continuously develop your content and build different outliers within your content to then establish what's working, what's not working, and what you can do to improve the overall sort of content journey for your target audience. And one more before I go, right? One more, because you've been getting loads of gems in this one. Make sure that you subscribe to the video if you're still locked in. And just before I give you this last gem, like the video as well, or comment if you want to see more videos like this. So lastly, I would say do not spend too much time focusing heavily on the sort of content creators who are amassing millions of views. And I say that because they have a sort of system that works for them. It works for them because they've spent a considerable amount of time, right? Years, decades, to perfect their craft and to understand what works for their desired target audience. So now they have a winning formula that they are unlikely to really change and shift off the back that it works. And when you get to that sort of point in your journey and your career and your business, effectively these videos cost money now. These videos cost money to make. So you're not in a position where you're going to be producing said content knowing that it's going to be a waste of money, or it's not going to lead to any opportunity or more leads into your business as a result. So with that in mind, take that with a pinch of salt, because a lot of their content, although it may garner a lot of attention and it may get the views that you may want as well, you have to understand that their particular content may not necessarily spike with a level of outliers at that stage, because they have a winning formula for them that is so unique that makes it work each and every time. So that particular outlier for you may not be beneficial. So I would say look at people who are maybe one step, two steps, or even three steps ahead of you when it comes down to the idea of producing said content, or even the idea of your brand and brand building. Those are the people that you need to focus on, because they are still in the elements of developing said content that you can look at for inspiration, but then also having an understanding of what is it within their remit, and the content that they make allows them to develop content outliers as a result. And then when you know that you are only three steps sort of behind from that particular person, then you know that you're not far off from being able to produce similar content that aligns with your methodology and your sort of way of thinking and the way of working into your video content that then can attract your target audience, right? So that is the way that you are able to then identify the content outliers, do the sort of competitor analysis of those content outliers, and then being able to adopt that sort of formula and methodology into your content in a way that makes the most sense directly for you in order for you to build your brand, right? So that's it for this video today. That's it. I hope that this video has provided lots of gems and insights for you. To be honest, I know it has. I know it has. So if you're watching this, then please, like I said, please subscribe to the video, subscribe to the channel, sorry. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and make sure you comment and let me know if you want to see more videos like this. And I'll be more than happy to drop more videos that align, because I drop one video every single day, as I mentioned, and we're still going strong. So on that note, that's it from me. Make sure that you like, comment, and subscribe again, and I'll catch you tomorrow. Peace out. Look after yourself.